Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com, where I am your host. My name is Brent Skinner, and my guest today is Jens Bender, who is founder and managing director of WorkTech Advisory. Hi, Jens. How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you, Brent. I'm fine. Thanks for the
Oh,
invite.
yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Very, very excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this episode. And we're going to be talking about something really interesting today. We have a working title. We might keep it. It's called Beyond the Paycheck: Why Payroll's Future Depends on Workforce Management. Um, and we have a few questions around that, and we talked about this in the green room a few weeks ago, and this is super, super intriguing. But as I like to ask all my guests first, before we get into the topic, there's a lot of passion in this space in human capital management. Everybody's kind of, especially leaders in this space, they have a real mission. What gets you going every day? What got you into this area of industry, Jens?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And to be blunt and honest, I started out and got into this space through my own startup and company that I already founded during university. And that startup made a few pivots. And therefore, at the very beginning, it wasn't actually intentional to land in HR tech and doing something in the future of work space. But that's how where we saw the biggest opportunity for the business. And that's, I believe, also what excites me about the space. Back then, we saw that there is still very little digitization in some areas of HR and in the area of people. And at the same time, people are the most important asset that companies have. And it also, on a personal level, it takes most of your daylight time that you spend at work. And therefore, I'm super enthusiastic about companies that help make that experience for employees better, working through technology, creating more transparency, and therefore I've been in this space now for 20 years. First as startup founder, then managing a software business, and the last 4 years as advisor to investors and their portfolio companies in the HR tech space. That's basically the background. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool that you got started at university. That's really neat. That's uncommon. It takes a special kind of person to do that. Um, well, let's get into it. I don't normally do this, but I'm just going to kind of read what we put together, kind of a blurb around this because it's super duper interesting. And I don't think I could paraphrase it better. So payroll has long been treated as a standalone system, mission critical, but largely confined to the final step of the workforce data chain. But what happens when payroll is no longer the end of the process, but part of a much larger productivity engine? That's kind of the premise of our talk today. I know you have a lot to share, and maybe let's get into this. I have one question for you, right off the bat. Why do you believe payroll and workforce management have historically remained separate? What is driving their convergence now?
Yeah. So why have they remained separate to a large part is because the people working with the technologies are different users, and also it requires to have payroll experts in that space to ensure local compliance and making sure that everything is done correctly in payroll. And that, from my perspective, is the most important reason why systems have been treated separately. Very often also tax advisors or advisors or outsourcing vendors support with the payroll process, whilst HR technology is more focused on the administration, and especially, of course, now on the employees as well. And I believe that's something that's changing, especially as I'm also very in depth in the topic of integrations and how data flows between different systems. That has become much more easy to integrate between technologies and to bring this data together. That has to do with the move from on-premise technologies to the cloud, and but also integration possibilities in general through APIs or now through MCPs. And at the same time, integration allows for a lot of benefits for the users, and the users on the one side being the employees that in the past have very often received their payslip not digitally, but basically in a printed way, that expect now to receive payslips digital, but also to understand in more detail what's behind payroll, behind gross and net salary, and how that can be optimized, and also to collect that information not as a separate information, but basically as an information that contains everything that's related to your how you're working, and at the same time, also those people processing the data have been very much limited in productivity in the past by making sure that the payroll data basically passes through different hands that are involved in the process. First, the employee that needs to provide data around, account information, and but also about the personal situation. But then the company internal payroll expert, an external tax advisor, and sometimes even an outsourcing partner in between. And that leads to a lot of communication and makes payroll productivity extremely low in most setups. And this productivity is on the one side, not creating this missing productivity is on the one side not creating a positive experience for the employees, but also making this process much more costly than it needs to be. And at the same time, there are also or at least here in Germany and in Europe, tax experts and payroll experts are becoming extremely limited, and therefore you want to make sure that this productivity increases. And all of that leads to more integration, better data flow, and a better employee experience if you converge those disciplines to a larger extent. Yeah.
Interesting. I have another question for you, and I'm going to combine it with something that just occurred to me. Um, from a productivity standpoint, what changes when payroll systems are tightly integrated with workforce management data like time and attendance? And is it more than just workforce management? And
Mm.
also, what is better payroll productivity? What is that?
Yeah. Yeah, first of all, it comes especially, of course, with the payroll process as a whole and productivity for that. You have averages of payroll experts processing around 1,000 payslips per month here in Germany for employees. The larger the company gets, of course, there is some level of scale, but that's the average. And that is also the limit that tax advisors and those people processing payroll at the moment are facing. And with and a lot of that missing productivity in this area is being created by communication between the different stakeholders along the process. And if you manage to, through on the one side integration, but in the future more and more also AI-based answers and improvements in the process, manage to increase that productivity and also reduce that friction. It means on the one side a much more productive payroll process. That means payroll is getting cheaper, especially on a from an administrational level. But at the same time, it also means, and that's super important from my perspective, a better experience for all of those people involved in the process. There is not, you don't need to touch data and information for a payslip of one person several times, but optimally only once. Even certain people don't need to touch that information and pass it on along the process, but making sure that employees already enter the right data in the HR system that then flows through and is controlled and validated with a local payroll engine leads to also a better experience, because you are not creating friction along this process. And that's where, on the one side, workforce management technologies are relevant that you mentioned, because there it's about time and time tracking and making sure that all the local information around, which shifts you have worked, whether you've worked overtime, when you have been working, is being measured. But on the other side, also the HR systems where the basic information about the employees is being processed. And if all of that is running much more productively, you can, of course, also think about making sure that additional services are being offered on top of that, like earned wage access. If you have live payroll all the time and know how much time is being spent at work and how much pay is actually being earned already, you can also offer earned payroll. If you don't know that, but only at the end of the month, it becomes much harder to do that. So that's where the integration between HR system, workforce management, and also payroll comes into play.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. What about finance systems?
Yeah, finance is the next, like financial planning and accounting, and also finance. And you will actually also see the first vendors in the space, and that's basically also how I look at the market. Are there already vendors offering all of that as one? Which vendors are those? Which customers are they addressing? And there are the first vendors that are especially SMB focused, so focusing on smaller and mid-market companies that have added financial planning and accounting topics to their portfolio as well, because of course the compensation and the payroll data is one very important impact on financial planning, especially for those companies that are employee heavy. It is very often the largest position on the P&L, and therefore that is something that's coming as well. I see a logical order, initially making sure that all the data around payroll is being brought together in a more systematic way. Also because that means it's one stakeholder that looks at especially personnel, the employee experience, but also the payroll and the compensation of people, and financial planning and accounting maybe then the next area. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's super interesting to think about. Um, just real quickly, sort of a slight detour or tangent. You mentioned MCPs as sort of an alternative, an emerging alternative to APIs, right? Um, Many in our audience may not be familiar with that. Could you just give us sort of if it's possible to give sort of a top line sort of explanation of what are we looking at here? What are MCPs all about?
Yeah, and I believe it's a super question. At the same time, it's also something that's still being challenged or evolving, because some people are already saying as well that MCP, that means Model Context Protocol, is already something that has proven not to be the next standard of integrations. But in general, MCP is a protocol that allows AI-based systems, LLMs, to communicate and exchange information amongst each other. So basically, the next level of APIs that have been the standard in the industry for years, and that a lot of vendors also still need to work on and offer, knowing that integration is still not, a standard, that data flows between all of the systems and that it's easy to integrate. It still remains one of the, if you ask HR, what are the biggest challenges with your technology, integrations is always top of the list, and huge projects to integrate different technologies. And MCP is basically next after API, the next standards that's at least currently being discussed in the context of AI agents communicating with each other and requesting data from one system to continue a process in another. Yeah.
This is actually a great a segue to my last question for you, and I swear I did not plan it this way. But looking ahead, how might AI accelerate the integration of payroll, workforce management, and HR systems?
Yeah.
In your neck of the woods, which is the European market.
Yeah. So um, if we look at AI, I don't only look at how it might facilitate the integration. I especially look at how might it facilitate the entire process and also the communication. And if you look at how much of the daily work of a payroll expert is currently managing communication and information that's coming from the customer or the person with or the employee, with update requests, with information that's sometimes entered on a PDF sheet, sometimes also entered just in an email, and basically taking that data, putting it into the systems, validating that, and then saying certain of that information is not complete or maybe wrong, and communicating back. I see a lot of potential, especially in this area of reducing communication and administrative work that is currently a lot of work for payroll experts, and thus increasing productivity through that. To facilitate integrations to a higher extent, there is also possibilities to ensure that with AI you can control the quality of data in the systems to a certain extent in a better way, to potentially start thinking about using agents that take over parts of the work. But there, I would say, compared to other areas, I wouldn't see payroll as a first mover in this area. Basically, with this mindset of never change a running payroll system, I rather believe that the payroll systems, because they need to reflect the local laws on a yearly basis, need to be updated, need to be approved and certified, locally assessed. I don't see AI coming in within months into this domain around the payroll engines themselves. But I rather see AI as a strong value add for the entire communication layer between the different stakeholders along the process. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Uh, There's a lot to look forward to in the not too distant future. And that means an hour from now in AI world, right? Um, um, any sort of closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to leave our audience
No,
with?
I completely share what you said. Whilst AI can be looked at as also a threat for how much everyone's work will be changing, the big discussion in payroll here in the European market has always been the scarcity of resources of experts in this space and their limited time. And in the last years, it was almost impossible to foresee that there would be enough experts in this space to process payroll in a compliant way, and making sure that that payroll keeps up. A lot of the payroll experts are approaching their pension or are at the end of their working life, and there is no new generation that is super excited about payroll in detail that is coming after. So I believe believe that's the exciting thing about AI in this space, that we will still need payroll experts that know all of this in detail, but some of the administrative work of the communication can be improved and made more productive. And thus there may be a solution ahead that 2 years ago, I believe everyone was still looking for. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. Jens, we've reached the end of the podcast. We could talk about this for a long time, I'm sure. Thank you so much for being a guest. This has been an illuminating conversation.
Thank you, Brent. It was fun, and wish you a great day and talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.